Welcome to Expert Profiles Atlanta, where Atlanta's influencers and innovators share strategies for overcoming obstacles and achieving success in business and life. Here's your host, best-selling author and Atlanta influencer, Neil Howe.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, and today my special guest is David Feldman. And David is the founder of 3Owl Media at 3owlmedia.com. And we're going to learn all about web design and development today. So welcome to the show, David Feldman.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I'm glad to be on here and excited to talk about the ever-changing world of web design.
It really is. It's always changing. With anything technical like this, there's always something new around the corner. So we've got to keep up with these things and stay current if we possibly can. So let's hear all about it. Give us a little bit of your background, David, and then tell us what kind of clients you help at 3Owl.
Yeah, you got it. So 3Owl itself, it's a creative agency. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia. Our office is at Pont City Market. And we focus on branding, web design, and creation. And our goal is to create transformational change for our clients. I went to business school at Emory and also did a lot of art and design while I was there. And I also majored in music at the same time. So a lot of left brain and right brain thinking. So going into web design was a really good balance of understanding design principles, but also understanding how to meet business goals. So I think the marriage of those two has really helped define what I love to do and has really helped me build a team around me that really helps capture my strength, but also complement the other parts. So we work with a lot of Atlanta clients. We're lucky to work with a lot of really impactful smaller organizations in Atlanta. We work with a lot of music venues. We've developed brands and websites for Terminal West, Variety Playhouse, Eddie's Attic. We're currently working with Center Stage in Midtown. And then we're also working with some regional and national brands that are based out of Atlanta, including Mellow Mushroom and Taco Mac, and actually just launched the website for Poppy's Cuban Grill. So I love the clients we have, and I love that we are in Atlanta. So any work we get to do with Atlanta-based folks is really special for us.
Great. I love that balance as well with the business background as well as the creative. You've got to have that balance for a website. It's got to look good and have that first impression, but it's got to be functional as well. What kind of problems do you see these companies having then?
So a lot of folks come to us saying, hey, we need a new website. And it's usually for a rudimentary reason. Their site doesn't look good on a phone, or folks visit their website and they realize they're not getting the right messaging, or organizationally they're having problems like, we have 1,000 locations and each one has a different menu and we're manually inputting menu items. So there's usually some trigger organizationally that is a cue to them to come look for a new website. A lot of our conversations actually turn into, hey, yes, you need a new website, but we need to take a step back and actually look at your brand, look at your language and your communication. So a lot of the questions that we ask our clients are, we know what you do and how you do it, but do you know why you do what you do? So we step back with a lot of our clients and actually spend a lot of time working on their brand, which is the language, the elevator pitch, why they get out of bed in the morning. I always give the example of Apple's why is we create disruptive technology that changes the world. It's not we create iPhones or we create computers with smart people. So it's the same thing with a lot of our clients. It's answering the why first, and then the website. One reason a lot of people come to us specifically about the website first is that's your primary touch point. That's usually where most people will find out about you first, where you're going to get the most interaction. But from there, usually if you're a restaurant, you want folks to visit your location or visit the music venue. Or if you're an online retailer, yes, you want people to love your site, but that you also want them to buy your product. So a lot of what we do first is really figure out the why and the language around that and the creative brief. And of course, the website is it's a manifestation of all that for sure. But a lot of the times clients don't realize there's actually a bigger question that they're asking.
Right. It's not just a place for somebody to go visit. They're looking for specific information, but they're also looking to get a little bit of the story. Tell me how you are able to get that story out.
Sure, and you're right. The reason we spend so much time actually figuring out the story and the purpose is, look, we can use all the right design tools, we can use all the right rules, and go by the book and design something very pretty for you that functions well. But I don't want you to get a million visitors that go to a site that doesn't actually represent who you are. So a lot of what we do a lot of exercises around purpose and figuring out the why, which I keep coming back to. And that's a tough question. So we actually do a full day brand workshop here. And a lot of our clients say, wow, this is just brand therapy for us. I've never actually gotten to talk about my 5-year and 20-year vision for my company. And the way we do that is it's all about having the right people in the room. So we did this for a college. We're actually rebranding a college in the Georgia college system. And so much about getting the story is about having the right people in the room. So yes, you want to have, your president, but you also want to have a student in the room if it's a college. And then you also want to have somebody in charge of recruitment and potentially a teacher. So getting that cross section, which starts from the bottom up and then from the top down, you get people talking who all have very valid points and very important experiences. So the brand workshop is critical, and that's where our team will also start developing the same set of language with our clients and also know, hey, as we're thinking about your website homepage, you said your 5-year goal is to increase recruitment from out of state by this percentage, and that's a major goal, then that's going to be featured on your website. So it's a way for us to really have that true north from the very beginning. But a lot of the times our clients don't have the opportunity to do that internally. And it's a challenge to do that internally without having an external expert to help you do it.
I think you bring up a great point there, David. There's so many companies that, have an idea at the top, the CEO or the founder, but, they don't really get the story from people lower down in the company or, from the end user. And being able to put all that together like you do is, what a great asset. Do you find that a lot of companies don't really have that 5-year or 20-year plan in mind?
Yeah, what we find is one of the great things about the brand workshop, and I think this is where you have folks like the president and the student and the folks in between start to build that trust, is you realize a lot of those goals are similar. They just don't talk about them. Mm-hmm. And if they do talk about them, they're not codified and written down. So a lot of it is actually writing it down. A lot of what we do is based on the Google Ventures brand sprint, where Google's investment arm will spend 5 days solving problems for large companies or like companies they invest in. So a lot of what we do is how do we get these questions answered quickly. So we have a system that really keeps it democratic. But yeah, we had one experience where we actually had a company that's got a 50-year history where the founder and the CEO were in the room together. And they were giving us gold, but it was never written down. So a lot of it is just writing it down and then not just being in the founder's head. That's why the language is so important. And what I love about it is once that session's done, you have sign off from everyone. So you can say, hey, the student body was represented and the board of directors was represented as well as the teachers union. So it's a great way to really capture every part of an organization and get buy-in from everybody before jumping into a branding process and then a website project, which, that's going to be your biggest marketing spend of that year. And that's going to be the way that the world sees you. So it's really important to have those meetings up front. And it surprises me when folks come to us and say, yeah, we did our last website. We showed them some examples we liked, and then our agency just got started. And that's not how we think about it.
Mm-hmm. So they've got this idea now, the branding and the idea of where they want to go, and you're able to tell that story in your website. But how do you measure results to see if it's really working and making an impact?
Yeah, measuring results it's an art, and there's different results for every website. I think the first step is setting out what your goals are, but then actually looking at how you can build your website so it lends itself to your key performance indicators. So a great example is we have a lot of franchise restaurant clients, and they actually ask us, hey, what actions on our site can we measure to show that there's growth? Because you can infer that, hey, if we had more visits to the restaurant, maybe our website's doing it. But as an agency, one of our goals is, hey, we actually want to be able to measure this change. So we set those up front, and I can actually give you some examples so it's less heady. But if you are visiting a restaurant's website on your mobile device, clicking on the get directions for a specific store, that is considered a conversion because the assumption is somebody's actually going to go visit your store. We work with a partner who actually gives us incredible analytics around online orders, so I can know exactly how many people added pepperoni to their pizza for Mellow Mushroom, for example, and we can actually work on the messaging, and we do something called A/B testing, which is basically, hey, we wonder if we should have this message that says, hey, pepperonis are awesome, you should put this on your pizza, or have something about, hey, our pepperonis are locally sourced. So, and we can actually test those two messages and see which one gets more people to put pepperoni on their pizza. Now, that's a very specific example, but you can imagine that how we continue to optimize. And it's, one of my favorite examples is an e-commerce client we had, and we said, you know what, we wonder if putting products as your first link and shop as your second link, which is what you currently have, we wonder if flip-flopping those will help increase sales. And it did by like 1.5%. And that didn't cost them anything to flip-flop those two. We just ran a test. So continuously testing, continuously optimizing, and working on that messaging that is still falls all within your brand. It's a way to actually measure true bottom line results.
And that's probably not something that many businesses or business owners think they can afford to do with their time, is all this split testing, but it is really important. Do you find that businesses are happy for you to do these things and take that work off their hands?
A lot of the time businesses, and this is where we provide the most value, and I think you know this in your line of work, and really any professional you talk to will say the same thing. The biggest value you provide is it's providing what the clients don't know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. And when you can illuminate and say, look, here's a whole other world of A/B testing that isn't expensive, but it can make a market difference so you're not having to guess at what you do. So yes, they love it. It's a lot easier for me, and this is one of the biggest challenges. Any designer will say this. It is always challenging to put a value on great design, but when it comes to being able to actually measure sales through A/B testing, that's one way to justify it. So my clients are more likely to say yes if I can say, look, it's gonna cost this much to do this A/B testing, but we're actually going to be able to prove that one way or the other, or one of 50 ways, one of these is actually going to help you increase your sales, so it'll pay for itself. So if I can say that up front, then they know they're going to have an ROI, and it's so much easier to sell on ROI, especially when you can prove it.
Definitely, and that's probably one of the most common questions that you get is, what kind of ROI am I going to get, for putting my money up front to have this website designed. So, David, what are some of the misconceptions that people have about getting a website designed? What expectations might they have?
So one of them always is timing. They'll say, oh, well, my friend is a lawyer and they got their site built in a couple of weeks. Why is this taking 6 months? So timing is always a big one. We build custom sites, which means that we're building solutions. So, and what I mean by that is, let's say you're an organization that has a directory of 2,000 employees and you're manually updating those employees on your website, and you're also manually inputting them into an internal system, we'll connect those. So when you update them in your internal system, it updates your website. One thing that we always do is we do an audit of their current processes and figure out how we can save time and how we can integrate everything. Most programs now are starting to talk to each other. You know this when you're on Instagram and it lets you push a picture to Facebook. Those two programs, of course, they're owned by Facebook, but they talk to each other. So in the same way with web design, we figure out ways for everything to connect so you're not doing any redundant work. That takes a lot of time and a lot of testing. And I think a lot of folks don't realize how much time goes into actually planning and creating systems. So if you want to build 3 new pages on your site after it launches, it's easy to do because we've already thought of all of that. Another misconception folks have are, hey, so we're going to launch the site. How much do I have to pay you to update the language on the homepage every time? Something that we do that we really pride ourselves in is we build custom admin panels, and we'll use WordPress or Magento or whatever the right standard system is, but we'll build on top of that where if we know that our client has a theme color every month, we're going to give them a color picker in their admin panel that says, hey, click on this drop down, select which color you want your homepage to be, and then it just changes. So when they get into their site on the back end, it looks so simple. Some of our clients want to have an iconography system. So we design 50 logos or 50 icons for them, and they can just select which icon they want and check off where they want it to go. So my biggest pride is when I show a client how to use their site and they're already like, you know what, we got it. We just want to go update it. And then I wake up the next morning, their site is, they built a bunch of pages. So we really want to enable our clients to actually get to update their site on their own. Most of the organizations we work with do have a marketing department, and they have a communications person who just loves us after we're done because they can go in and create all the pages they want to, all the calls to action that they want to, and realize that there's nothing they can't do because we've worked so closely with the organization throughout the whole process to build them a site that solves their problems rather than giving them a blanket solution. So those are, I think the timing is a big one, and then just being able to update their site on their own without having to know code is another big one.
And how about for some businesses that think, well, I can just get a template and do it myself? What's the difference between them trying to do that and having a custom site developed?
So we have a lot of businesses that'll come to us and say, here's our budget, build us a website. And usually that budget is, if it's close enough for us to build a very basic custom site, what I usually like to do is actually step back and say, look, there are great tools to build the template site, and I'm for it, but we step back and say, let's work on your brand. And if you do build the template site, I want your logo to be right on. I want your language to be representative of who you are, the photography to be representative of who you are. So a lot of the times, if it still works budget-wise, but we realize we can only do a custom site or a brand, we'll usually focus most of that budget on building the brand and giving them all the tools. And then there are great Squarespace sites out there. The businesses that have successful Squarespace sites have spent a lot of time perfecting their brand. And that's the challenge with template sites. What we're realizing is that, yeah, you can buy a template site, but all too often those templated sites become the brand, and your brand becomes something that was created as a catch-all solution. So, but it is, as a business, it's one of the changing elements in web design in general, that most of our projects are either very large-scale enterprise solutions, or we're focusing on working heavily on people's brands, and then the website for budgets is lower. But it's also because we're able to do it faster because the tools are out there that allow us to do it more quickly, but still at the same quality.
David, what fears, if any, do people have about making all these changes to their website and having a big project like this designed?
So a lot of the fears come from previous experiences. There's so many steps to the process, and there's so much. If you think of Mad Men era, your agency would talk to you, they would disappear in a room for a month and come out and say, ta-da, here's your new brand. And that all too often happened with web design and design in general, where there's this wall between the agency and the client. And it's something that we hold ourselves to is that there's no magic to what we do. There's research, there's communication, there's a process. So we have a glossary of terms that we give our clients so they know the jargon that we're using. We do a presentation of, hey, website 101, branding 101, here's the terms you're going to hear over the next year, so you actually know what we're talking about. So one of our roles is education and saying, hey, like, you don't have to know everything we're doing, but we at least want you to understand where we're at and make you feel that if you have any questions for us, we're happy to educate you throughout the process. So we show our research. We actually had a meeting this morning talking about all the steps that we want to take so the clients know exactly where we are at in the process and that they know what to expect. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges is, hey, we just signed this contract. It's a lot of hours. How are they going to use them? So we're really place a big focus on demystifying how it's done.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these problems can be handled with good communication between, your client and yourself. Just making sure that they know there's work getting done and being able to see some of the outcome from it.
Absolutely.
What kind of pitfalls or common mistakes do you see businesses make, maybe even before coming to you, some past experiences that they might have had or mistakes that they've made?
We can usually tell some of the pitfalls just by looking at their current site or their current brand. When we build brands and sites, we always think about scaling. We think in 5 years, will this still serve your purpose and will this grow with your company? I'll see this on enterprise level sites. I'll see pages that are hacked together and just like basically just Frankenstein together, where different elements are taken from different pages, copied and pasted to tell a story. Or I'll see a logo that doesn't quite work with a sub-brand underneath. A lot of the pitfalls are just getting a website built where the company changed or scaled and the site was built as a snapshot of exactly where they were at the time it launched. And the same thing with a logo where they might have opened up another 20 locations and didn't know how to create a sub-brand with that location name associated with the logo. So we can usually start just by looking at their front end, like the actual website itself, to see how they start to cobble pieces together. And then we actually log in and look at the code. We'll see that there's somebody there who kind of sort of gets how to code a site, and they'll just start adding pieces onto it. So it becomes very apparent usually when I'll do an audit of somebody's site and somebody's brand while I'm pitching. I'll usually be able to sit down and say, hey, I'm guessing that you've had these 3 or 4 problems, and that's one of the reasons you came to us. And usually I'm right there, as I can see those pitfalls just by what the customer is experiencing. And as a customer, you might not realize they're pitfalls, but it also means that you're not communicating as a company. You're not communicating your brand in the way it deserves to be.
Now, you've given us a few examples, David, of some of the companies that you've worked for, but is there any that stands out in your mind that, you really made a big impact with? What kind of problems were they having before they came to you, and, what solutions were you able to provide, and ultimately, what was the outcome for them?
Yeah, a client that's very special to us, and I'm going to send them this podcast so they can hear this episode, but Mellow Mushroom is a very special client for us because it was our first national brand, and they're 250 locations and growing, and they're based out of Atlanta. But they, when we initially pitched them, we saw that they were having just challenges with their mobile site, and they were having challenges with having such unique restaurants where the menus were a little bit different at every restaurant, where pricing was a little bit different. And as they continued to grow and ensure quality at all the restaurants, it was hard for them to pull everything into their website. So we won a ton of awards with the new site that we launched for them, but so much that we cared about was making sure that it was rock solid under the hood. So that means that every time any restaurant updates its menu, it syncs to the website. We made sure that down to the URL structure for each local store, that the URL structure was the best practice. So if you Googled Mellow Mushroom Midtown, you got on Google your top 4 closest locations all formatted the same way. We helped them roll out their first big online ordering campaign and their catering campaign. So we were lucky to partner with them right when they made a big shift to digital. And we've been rolling with them as every new digital piece comes out, and we've been really lucky to actually get to build that for them. So we've seen a 50% increase in mailing list joins, and just a lot of really great KPIs we set out initially. We're actually getting to see some really great numbers of growth across every single vertical that we set out to help them grow.
That is tremendous. Great success there. Well done. Now, can you give me a lesson that you learned early on in business that still impacts how you do business today, David?
Yeah, I'm thinking back to my very first brand project that I did, and I think this goes to any designer, any web designer, anybody who's getting into making logos and making brands. Set out expectations and be very clear about what you're delivering. My very first project, I put together a 50-hour project, and like any beginner designer, probably put in 500 hours. So it's the ability to say no, but only because you have clearly defined your scope. And I have learned that up front, that don't be scared to talk about money, because money is directly associated with how many hours you put in. And if you can outline every block of hours that you're working on a project for. And if you're a beginner, hey, start pricing yourself low enough. I believe that those hours that you work initially, that, you're making minimum wage, it's yourself paying for your own education. But as I grew, I learned that scope is so important to outline. And a lot of the times you're doing work that you don't even realize you're not billing for. So really outlining every hour that you're working, and then being comfortable saying, hey, this is actually out of scope and I'd love to do it, but if you look at all the hours I outlined, this isn't there. And that happens to a lot of younger designers. And I think it's important to, they still don't know what they don't know. I remember being in that place as well. So I think that, not being scared to talk about money and putting together really clear scopes of what you're doing so your client knows everything they're paying for.
Very, very good advice. Now, if somebody is looking for a web designer or somebody to help them with their brand development, what kind of questions should they be asking?
If they're looking for, so I think the first question they should ask is, hey, if somebody goes to my website, does it tell the story accurately? So, if you're a restaurant or if you're a educational institution, you're still around and you're growing for a reason. But if you say, hey, when I go to this website, it doesn't at all feel like the experience you have in person, you should ask yourself, hey, is it our messaging? Is it our website? That's usually your first cue, is when people come to your establishment and say, wow, I never realized how great this was until I got here. And your brand should capture that, and your website should capture that. If you're scared to update your site and you need to update it, and then if you're one of those people that says, I haven't updated my site in 2 years because I'm scared, it's definitely time to launch a new site. Another one, and this is just education for everyone listening to this, because we've been seeing this really over the last year, the way that restaurants, institutions, any brick and mortar location has to have specific accessibility standards met. So that's wheelchair ramps, specific sizes for walkways, etc. We're seeing the same type of accessibility happen on the web now. So your website actually has to meet accessibility standards. So that's anybody from people who have trouble seeing or have a tremor or had a stroke and are actually using computers as their primary method of getting information. Websites, there's actually a checklist now for your website to meet accessibility standards. And when I told you I do those website audits, to a lot of folks, I'm saying, hey, I'm guessing you guys got got hit with a warning about your accessibility. So that's actually something we include standard now, is making sure the websites meet all accessibility requirements.
That's good to know. New development. Well, David Feldman, you are the founder of 3 Owl Media. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you if they are looking for help with their websites?
Check out our site at 3owlmedia.com or follow us on Instagram at 3owlmedia, or you can send me a message directly. That's David at 3owlmedia.com, and that's the numerical 3owlmedia.com.
Excellent. Well, I've definitely learned a lot today about web development and branding, as I'm sure all our listeners have as well. Thanks for sharing all that great content with us today, David.
Yeah, this was a blast. I always love talking about it. I'm really fired up after having this conversation. So thanks for reaching out. I've really enjoyed speaking to you as well.
All right. And to our listeners, if you like what you hear, hit that like button and share, and we'll see you next time on the show.
Thank you for listening to Expert Profiles Atlanta with Neil Howe. To learn more about the resources in the show or to listen to past episodes, visit expertprofilesatlanta.com.